When Jada and Janelle Rivers, black twin sisters, enter a prestigious private school in the United States, where the majority of students are white and from wealthy families, they expect difficulties, but not real psychological and physical terror. From the first day, Ryan Mallory, the son of one of the richest local businessmen, begins a systematic bullying campaign with a group of chosen ones. Public insults, bullying in the corridors, racial comments. The girls endure everything in silence. But one day, when humiliation turns into violence, everything changes. Ryan and his friends don't know that Jada and Janelle are both black belts in karate, raised by their martial arts teacher father who taught them never to bow down in the face of evil and never to remain silent when it comes to dignity. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Ridgewood Academy, a prestigious private school nestled in the heart of an affluent suburb. Its towering brick facade and ivy-covered walls exuded an air of exclusivity, a silent reminder of the wealth and privilege that defined its student body. For most, the first day of school was a routine affair, a chance to reconnect with friends, flaunt summer vacations, and settle into the rhythm of academic life. But for Jada and Janelle Rivers, it was anything but ordinary. The sisters, identical twins with deep brown skin and strikingly intelligent eyes, stepped through the wrought iron gates with a quiet confidence that belied the apprehension bubbling beneath the surface. Their matching uniforms, crisp and perfectly tailored, did little to mask the fact that they were outsiders in a sea of sameness. Ridgewood Academy was overwhelmingly white, its halls filled with the children of CEOs, politicians, and old-money families. Jada and Janelle, daughters of a martial arts instructor and a nurse, were anomalies scholarship students whose presence was met with curiosity, skepticism, and, in some cases, outright hostility. As they walked toward the main building, the twins felt the weight of dozens of eyes on them. Conversations paused, heads turned, and whispers spread like wildfire. Who are they? Did you hear they're on scholarships? I bet they don't even belong here. The comments were hushed but loud enough to reach their ears. Jada clenched her jaw, her fingers tightening around the strap of her backpack. Janelle, ever the calmer of the two, placed a reassuring hand on her sister's arm. Ignore them, she whispered. We knew this wouldn't be easy. Their first class was English literature, held in a grand room with high ceilings and ornate wood paneling. The teacher, Mrs. Whitmore, greeted them with a polite but distant smile, her eyes betraying a flicker of surprise at their presence. As the twins took their seats near the back, the murmurs began again. One voice, louder than the rest, cut through the room like a knife. Looks like Ridgewood's standards are slipping, Ryan Mallory sneered, his tone dripping with disdain. The son of a powerful local businessman, Ryan was the unofficial leader of Ridgewood's elite, a group of students who wielded their wealth and privilege like weapons. His comment elicited a chorus of laughter from his friends. Their smug faces turned toward the twins. Jada's fists clenched under the desk, her nails digging into her palms. Janelle shot her a warning glance, silently urging her to stay composed. Let it go, Janelle mouthed, her expression firm. Jada exhaled slowly, forcing herself to focus on the teacher's lecture. But the tension in the room was palpable, a simmering undercurrent that refused to dissipate. The day continued in much the same vein. In the cafeteria, Ryan and his group claimed the best seats, loudly mocking the twins as they ate their lunch in silence. In the hallways, they accidentally bumped into them, their laughter echoing off the walls. By the time the final bell rang, Jada and Janelle were exhausted, not from the academic rigor, but from the relentless scrutiny and subtle hostility that followed them everywhere. As they walked home, the twins exchanged few words. Jada's anger simmered just below the surface, her mind replaying every insult, every sneer, every whispered comment. Janelle, though equally affected, maintained her composure, her thoughts focused on the bigger picture. We'll get through this, she said finally, her voice steady. We've faced worse before. Their father, Marcus Rivers, greeted them at the door with his usual warm smile. A tall, muscular man with a calm demeanor, Marcus had spent years teaching martial arts to students of all ages. His philosophy was simple. Strength was not about aggression but about control, discipline, and the ability to protect oneself and others. As the twins recounted their day, Marcus listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each word. "You knew this wouldn't be easy," he said finally, his voice gentle but firm. "But remember what I've always taught you. You don't fight to prove a point. You fight to defend your dignity. And sometimes the strongest fight is the one you don't engage in." Jada nodded reluctantly, her anger still simmering. Janelle, ever the pragmatist, asked, "What if it gets worse?" Marcus's gaze hardened slightly, his protective instincts kicking in. "Then you do what you've been trained to do. You stand your ground. You protect yourselves. And you make sure they understand that respect is not optional." As the twins prepared for bed that night, Jada couldn't shake the feeling that their father's words would soon be put to the test. Ridgewood Academy was a battlefield, and they were soldiers, armed not with weapons but with the strength, discipline, and resilience instilled in them by years of training. They had entered the lion's den, and though the odds were stacked against them, they were determined to emerge unscathed. The first week at Ridgewood Academy passed in a haze of whispered speculation and icy stares. While Jada and Janelle Rivers had managed to endure the curious glances and subtle side comments on their arrival, it wasn't long before the underlying hostility began to manifest with alarming clarity. In a school where tradition and privilege reigned supreme, their presence disrupted the established order, and Ryan Mullery, the arrogant son of one of the wealthiest local businessmen, was quick to seize the opportunity. Almost immediately after the initial day's discomfort, Ryan's clique began to target the twin sisters with a precision that was both methodical and cruel. It started in the corridors between classes. As the sisters hurried from one class to the next, Ryan and his group would block their path. "Hey, new girls!" Ryan would call out with a sneer, his laugh echoing off the polished marble floors. His cronies would follow his lead, smirking and jeering, making careless remarks about how out of place they were in a school for the elite. During one such moment in the hallway, as the twins clutched their textbooks and tried to make a quick exit, Ryan casually stepped in front of them. With his voice laced in mocking amusement, he declared, "I heard you two came all the way here from some backwater to see if you even know how to fight." His words were punctuated by the laughter of his friends, who trailed behind him as if on cue. Their comments were not only aimed at belittling the sisters' background, but also steeped in racist overtones that stung deeply. Janelle, always the quieter of the two, met his eyes and whispered, "We're here to learn, not to play your petty games." But the moment passed almost unnoticed as the jeers continued unabated. In the classroom, the atmosphere was equally hostile. Despite their best efforts to blend into the environment and focus on their studies, the twins found themselves the subject of glances, snide remarks, and even deliberate disruptions during class discussions. Sometimes during group projects, fellow students, friends of Ryan, would exclude them outright. Teachers, either unaware of the full extent of the ridicule or choosing not to intervene, maintained a stoic silence that left the twins isolated. When a few insensitive comments slipped into classroom chatter, the instructors offered perfunctory apologies that did little to ameliorate the pain of being singled out by one's peers. The cafeteria proved to be one of the harsher battlegrounds. As the morning bell rang for lunch, groups of students clustered around tables, their conversations filled with laughter and gossip that turned pointed whenever the topic of the new girls arose. Ryan, ever the ringleader, would command his group to greet the twins with a barrage of sarcastic compliments that barely masked his contempt. "You know, you girls have the kind of style that only outsiders can pull off," he would announce loudly, ensuring that everyone within earshot heard his scoffing tone. Each comment, veiled as a compliment, was a dagger in disguise, meant to reduce their dignity to a punchline. As the days turned into weeks, the intensity of the bullying escalated. Ryan's group became increasingly bold. In the hallways, they would purposefully bump into the twins, causing Jada to stumble and Janelle to drop her books. At times, they would hurl crass racial slurs, their words echoing with a venom that left deep emotional scars. One afternoon, while the twins walked together after class, A group of Ryan's friends trailed them with malicious smiles, whispering comments about the exotic nature of their accents and the presumed inadequacy of their educational pedigree. The demeaning remarks were accompanied by pointed gestures, mocking imitations of the sisters' speech and exaggerated postures meant to demean. Throughout this relentless campaign of humiliation, the school's administration and many of the teachers remained frustratingly indifferent. It was as if the bullying was dismissed as a minor rite of passage, a seasonal misbehavior among teenagers that would eventually dissipate. When the sisters sought help from a guidance counselor after an especially demeaning encounter in the library, they were met with assurances that children do what they do, and that they should learn to ignore the noise. No one stepped forward to challenge the behavior of Ryan's clique, and the silence from the authorities deepened the sense of isolation and injustice the twins felt. At home, the toll of the daily harassment became painfully evident. Jada's usually resolute spirit was clouded by anger and frustration. The family dinner table, once a haven of warmth and encouragement, became a space where the twins recounted painful tales in hushed, guarded tones. Their father, Marcus Rivers, a man who had instilled in them the discipline and resilience that came with years of martial arts training, listened intently. His eyes darkened with protective concern as the details unfolded. Snide comments in the hallway, isolated physical shoves, and racist taunts that were designed to erode their self-confidence. "I warned you both that sometimes only the quiet strength of discipline and honor can overcome such cruelty," he reminded them. But between anger and a desperate need for validation, the twins struggled to find a balance between enduring the torment and fighting back. That evening, as the family gathered in their modest living room, Marcus spoke of the legacy of their training. He recounted the principle he'd taught them from the outset: never to bow to bullies, never to let one's dignity slip through their fingers, even when it seemed so easy to succumb. "Violence isn't the answer, but neither is silence," he said quietly, locking eyes with each of his daughters. "We must learn when to defend ourselves, not with brute force, but with the power of our convictions." As midnight approached, the school's tormentors continued their misguided revelry elsewhere, unaware that the seeds of resistance had been silently sown in the hearts of Jada and Janelle. Each passing day under Ryan's tyranny only steeled their resolve. They would endure, they would learn, and someday, when the moments of humiliation escalated into an undeniable tipping point, they would show these bullies that strength came not only from physical prowess, but from the steadfast protection of one's identity and dignity. In the quiet darkness of their shared room, the twins exchanged determined glances. No longer would they be the silent victims of cruelty. Even as Ryan's laughter echoed in the corridors and teachers' inaction deepened their sense of betrayal, they clung tightly to the values their father had instilled in them, a promise that someday, when pushed beyond the limits, the truth of their strength would emerge. And though the storm of racism and prejudice raged around them during these early days of their new school, deep down, the sisters knew that the lessons of resilience and self-respect would ultimately light a path out of the darkness. That evening, in the modest yet warm living room of the Rivers household, the weight of another painful day hung heavy in the air. The soft glow of a single lamp illuminated the space as Jada and Janelle sat down at the dining table, their expressions mixing determination with an undercurrent of hurt. The silence between them spoke volumes, a silence filled with the echoes of the day's relentless bullying at Ridgewood Academy. Their father, Marcus Rivers, a man whose strong yet gentle presence had always provided comfort, entered the room quietly after his own long day at work. In his eyes burned the twin fires of worry and resolve, for he had heard fragments of his daughter's harrowing accounts during their earlier phone call. Without preamble, he sat down with them, his weathered face softening with paternal concern. "Girls," he began in a low, steady voice, "I know what you've been going through today. Tell me everything from the start." Jada's eyes flashed with anger as she recounted the snide remarks in the hallways, Ryan Mullery's mocking laughter, and the vicious jabs hurled in public areas that left them feeling isolated and humiliated. Her voice, though trembling slightly, laced its narrative with unwavering clarity about each incident. Janelle, ever the quieter yet equally observant sister, interjected with details that painted a picture of cruelty. instances when classmates had purposefully trailed behind them, mimicking their every move in a mockery that stung even more deeply than words alone. Marcus listened with a heavy heart, his presence both stern and compassionate. He knew that the public humiliation the twins endured was not merely a personal trial. It was a calculated assault on their dignity by a group that assumed power solely through wealth and privilege. "I warned you," he said softly, "that in this world, sometimes cruelty finds its way through silence and inaction. But you must remember, you are never without strength." After the recounting of the day, the conversation turned tender yet incisive. "I see the anger in both of you," Marcus observed, "but also the deep pain behind it. Anger is a powerful emotion, but if you let it consume you, it will blind you to the greater truth. Remember, strength is not in raging back immediately, but in controlling that anger, channeling it, and choosing the right moment to defend your dignity." Janelle's eyes brimmed with tears that she fought hard not to shed. "But, Dad, it feels so unfair," she murmured. "Every day we have to hide our true selves, to suppress our voices because of things we didn't do and who we are. It hurts, and sometimes I feel like screaming back at them." Marcus reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "I understand, sweetheart. I too have experienced bitterness in the face of injustice. But remember what I taught you in every lesson. The art of discipline, the value of true strength lies in restraint and wisdom. There is a difference between reacting impulsively and asserting your dignity with measured power." That night, after a long and healing conversation at the dinner table, the twins stayed up well past bedtime talking about what it meant to be resilient. They recalled memories of their childhood, training in the dojo under their father's guiding hand. A sanctuary where every chop, every kata, and every spar served as a lesson not only in martial arts but in self-respect and honor. Their father's teachings had always been simple yet profound. Never lower your head to bullies, and never remain silent when your dignity is at stake. But also, know the difference between aggression and self-defense. In the early hours of the morning, before the first light crept through their window, the sisters changed out of their school clothes and into their training gear. In the subdued quiet of their home, they moved with a shared determination. The floor of their small living room transformed into a makeshift training space, a place where the soft thuds of disciplined strikes and the controlled movements of practice techniques replaced the harsh echoes of the school corridors. Jada threw herself into a series of powerful kicks and swift punches, each movement a silent declaration of her inner strength. Meanwhile, Janelle, with her graceful yet resolute form, executed precise blocks and countermoves. Their movements, honed through years of martial arts training, became a form of meditation, each strike an expression of their refusal to be crushed by the weight of humiliation. The rhythmic cadence of their training was not only a defense against external aggression, but also a way to channel the anger that simmered within them into something constructive. At one point, as they paused for a brief rest between sets, Jada's voice trembled with a mix of frustration and resolve. "I'm so tired of being the target," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the wooden floor. "Every day, I feel the weight of every angry word and every sneer." Janelle, always the calmer force, responded steadily, "I know, but think about what Dad said. We have the power to stand up, not by fighting blindly, but by safeguarding our dignity with our discipline and actions. That power is with us every time we train and every time we choose not to let them break us." The sisters reflected on the cycle of bullying versus the possibility of rising above it. In the back of their minds, thoughts of vengeance mingled with a deeper aspiration, to be a beacon of resilience and strength in a world that often revered aggression over integrity. They recalled their father's quiet admonitions that the true fight was not always physical. It was a battle fought with intellect, perseverance, and the courage to seek justice in one's actions. Their internal struggle was palpable. Jada's fiery spirit sometimes urged her to lash out immediately at the injustice of it all, to prove to her tormentors that she was not helpless. Janelle, however, reminded her that true power lies in self-control, that a measured response can be far more devastating than a momentary outburst. Their silent conversation was one of balance, a confluence of anger and composure of fire and water, where one emotion tempered the other until they merged into a steadfast determination. As the night waned, the sisters agreed that their training would not merely serve as a tool for self-defense on the physical level, but also as a metaphor for their enduring commitment to dignity. They promised each other that no matter how harsh the cruelty they faced at Ridgewood Academy, they would never betray the values intrinsic to their identity. The consistent rhythm of their training and the deep wisdom cherished from their father's teachings would be their constant allies against injustice. Dawn eventually crept in, softening the edges of the night with a pale light. In the early hours, as the world outside stirred awake, the twin sisters lay, momentarily still and reflective. Their minds churned with the memories of the day's torment and the promise of what they could achieve, not just by fighting back when necessary, but by embodying the quiet strength that had been forged through both adversity and rigorous discipline. This was a turning point in their young lives. In the crucible of pain and bullying, both Jada and Janelle were learning not only to withstand the storm, but to direct its force toward a future where their voices would be heard and their dignity respected. Their home, imbued with the legacy of martial prowess and the values of self-respect, stood as the fortress from which they would draw their strength. Even as they recognized that the painful journey ahead would demand more than just physical skill, they embraced the challenge with a resolute heartbeat, a promise that someday, when confronted with injustice on an even larger stage, they would rise as symbols of calm resilience, never lowering their heads, never succumbing to the darkness of silence. It was a day like any other at Ridgewood Academy, until it all came crashing in the sterile, echoing corridors of the school. The hallway, usually abuzz with the murmur of hurried students and ring of locker doors, suddenly became a stage for the long-anticipated climax of cruelty. For weeks, Jada and Janelle Rivers had endured systematic bullying, whispered racial slurs, public jeers, and deliberate attempts to isolate them. Now, that relentless undercurrent of humiliation had morphed into an outright act of physical aggression. It began innocuously enough. The twins were making their way from their last class to the cafeteria when they noticed a familiar cluster of Ryan Mullery's crew leaning against the polished lockers. Their mocking laughter reverberated off the walls, a sound so familiar it sent cold shivers down their spines. Ryan, with his trademark sneer and eyes full of derision, stepped forward and called out, "Hey, new girls! I told you you wouldn't last long in these halls. I bet you don't even know how to handle yourself." His voice was edged with amusement as he let the words hang in the air. Janelle met his gaze with a calm, defiant stare as Jada's fists clenched in silent fury. The corridor seemed to close in around them. A few students paused to watch, while others pretended not to notice the brewing storm. The tension was palpable, each moment stretching into an eternity. Despite the regular abuse, the sisters had always endured quietly, until today, when the daily insults escalated unexpectedly. Out of nowhere, one of Ryan's cronies, emboldened by the collective jeers, shoved Jada hard against the lockers. The impact reverberated through the corridor as startled gasps echoed from nearby students. In that split second, the energy in the hallway snapped. What had once been verbal taunts now threatened to become physical violence. Ryan's gang closed in, their smug expressions hardened and eager for more domination. Murmurs turned into shouts, and the look in Ryan's eyes signaled that this was no longer a mere spectacle of ridicule. It was an all-out attempt to break them. Janelle, with a measured breath, stepped forward as she whispered, "We aren't here to fight. We're here to defend ourselves." Her soft but unwavering tone conveyed a promise and a warning. In the blink of an eye, the situation accelerated. One of the bullies lunged at Janelle, aiming to trip her deliberately. At that moment, both sisters instinctively reacted with the years of intensive training ingrained in their muscles. Before anyone could register what was happening, Janelle moved with a fluid, precise motion, executing a block that deflected the attacker's force, simultaneously sending him stumbling backward. Jada, recovering from the initial shove, rose swiftly. The attack had turned into a full-blown ambush. A flurry of fists and shoves erupted as several of Ryan's cohorts converged on the twins. But every physical blow that was hurled their way was met with a disciplined defense. A karate block here, a well-timed parry there. Their movements were not frantic. They were controlled, displaying the mastery of black belts earned through rigorous years of training under their father's watchful guidance. The corridor soon filled with the sounds of scuffling feet, the rapid exhalations of exertion, and the shocked murmurs of students who had never witnessed such a transformation. The bullies, used to their power rooted solely in entitlement and cruelty, were taken aback by the calm efficiency and speed with which the sisters countered their aggression. Ryan tried to regain the upper hand by jeering as he advanced. "I told you, you're nothing but a joke." But his voice faltered as Jada, with a controlled surge that was both elegant and powerful, intercepted his thrust. In one smooth, almost choreographed move, she sidestepped his charge and delivered a precise strike that sent him reeling into the glass doors at the end of the hall. The confrontation escalated and, more importantly, was caught on video. A smartphone raised discreetly by a fellow student captured every moment. The determined expressions on Jada and Janelle's faces, the reckless aggression of Ryan's gang, the exact moment when bullying finally breached the line into violence, and the measured, almost serene composure of the sisters as they defended themselves. In minutes, the video would be uploaded online, its raw authenticity soon to spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of an outraged community and igniting debates about the abuse of power and privilege in elite institutions. Despite the rapid turn of events, the sisters maintained remarkable restraint. They struck with precision but never with the intent to maim. They did not retaliate with savagery. Instead, they exhibited a disciplined defense that was a testament to their upbringing, a demonstration that true strength lies in dignified self-protection rather than vengeful brutality. With every calculated move, they turned the tide, reframing an attempt at dehumanization into a display of quiet, unyielding power. The bullies, overwhelmed by the unexpected resistance, began to retreat, their confidence shattered by the girls' mastery of technique and the undeniable moral high ground now firmly established in the corridor. As the chaos subsided, a heavy silence filled the hall. Students stood in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of fear, admiration, and disbelief. Teachers and administrators, who had long turned a blind eye to the mistreatment, rushed into the corridor, shocked by the carnage of cruelty that had erupted before their eyes. The video, already circulating among smartphones, was a stark reminder of how unchecked bullying had escalated into violence, and of the remarkable strength of two young women who refused to let dehumanization govern their lives. When the incident finally ended, the corridor bore the scars of a moment that would forever redefine the culture at Ridgewood Academy. The sisters, though physically unscathed, bore the emotional weight of the ordeal with quiet resolve. They exchanged a look, a silent vow that they would continue to uphold their dignity at any cost. In that charged moment of physical confrontation, the balance had shifted irrevocably. No longer were they simply the targets of jeering insults. They had become symbols of strength and controlled resistance. Their disciplined response had not only defended them in that critical instant but had also sent a powerful message. The voice of dignity, when expressed through action, can disarm even the deepest cruelty. In the turbulent moments immediately following the violent confrontation, the corridor slowly fell into a heavy, anticipatory silence. The echoes of hurried footsteps and murmurs of shock still reverberated off the tiled walls, but a quiet authority had now taken center stage. Jada and Janelle Rivers, though battered by the barrage of aggression a moment earlier, stood together with unwavering composure. Their eyes, sharp with focus and steadfast resolve, spoke of a strength that transcended anger. They had not retaliated with senseless force. Instead, they had defended themselves with the refined discipline of years spent mastering karate under the vigilant guidance of their father, Marcus Rivers. The sisters moved away from the epicenter of the skirmish like graceful sentinels. As the group of bullies began to retreat, their faces clouded with both anger and disbelief, Jada and Janelle exchanged a look that conveyed their shared commitment to dignity and self-respect. Without a word spoken in haste, they reorganized themselves in formation, as if performing a well-rehearsed kata, each movement deliberate and controlled. Their posture was calm yet assertive, a silent statement that they refused to allow humiliation to devour their sense of self. Moments later, A teacher and a school administrator rushed into the hallway, along with a couple of other staff members. Their expressions a blend of shock and regret. The incident, now unmistakably captured on a buzzing smartphone by a bystander, was already making its way through the school's private messaging group. The video was clear enough to leave no doubt about what had transpired. Still, as the authorities began taking statements and checking on the physical condition of those involved, the twins set themselves apart by not resorting to defensive aggression, but by choosing measured, dignified composure. Janelle stepped forward first to address the small cluster of teachers and administrators. Her voice was steady, her tone devoid of the fury one might expect after such an ordeal, yet it carried a resonant firmness. "We did not come here today to start fights," she said quietly, "but to defend our right to be treated with respect. What you witnessed was not an act of aggression on our part, but a necessary response to unwarranted systemic cruelty. We trained to remain calm in the face of injustice. We are not fighting for revenge. We are fighting for dignity." Jada then added, her eyes meeting those of the principal, "Our response was measured because we've been taught that true strength isn't about how loudly you can shout back, but how firmly you stand when faced with overwhelming odds. This is our stand against bullying, against racism, and against any attempt to strip us of our humanity." Her words, spoken in a low but clear voice, reverberated with the weight of personal sacrifice and long-practiced resolve. Within minutes, the school's administration was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. When the video circulated among faculty, staff, and even some of the student council members, it became undeniable that the systematic torment that had been simmering for weeks had erupted into an incident too serious to ignore. The bullies' faces, twisted with shock and humiliation on camera, became an unintentional confession of their own shortcomings and the school's prior inaction. The fact that the incident had been recorded only lent further authenticity to the sisters' account. The next few hours unfolded like a carefully choreographed spectacle of accountability. The school, now in a state of crisis management, called for an emergency assembly. Teachers and administrators scrambled to contact the parents of the offending students. The increasingly viral video quickly found its way on social media, sparking intense discussions about privilege, racism, and the abuse of power in elite institutions. The wider community, the simple but determined voices outside the well-oiled machine of Ridgewood Academy, began to rally behind Jada and Janelle. Yet, even as the bullies and their parents found themselves in urgent meetings with a panicked administration, the sisters maintained their composure. Later that day, in a hushed classroom corner away from prying eyes and heated whispers, Jada and Janelle huddled together, their expressions both tired and resolute. "They thought we were weak, that we'd crumble under their cruelty," Jada murmured almost to herself. "But we showed them that true strength is quiet and unwavering." Janelle replied, "We defended ourselves with control. We didn't let them steal our dignity with their vitriol. It's not about fighting with anger. It's about standing firm with discipline and honor." Their voices carried the calm assurance of those who have trained relentlessly for moments exactly like this. They knew that physical prowess, honed through discipline, was secondary to the strength of character and the power of measured response. In the days that followed, as investigative meetings unfolded and policy reviews were demanded by outraged parents and community activists, Jada and Janelle became unexpected symbols of resilience. Their composed retort, captured perfectly by the viral video, spread across local news outlets and social media platforms, galvanizing support from students who had long remained silent. The twins' measured defiance became the rallying cry for fairness among those who had felt bullied by an indifference born of privilege. Within the hallowed halls of Ridgewood Academy, discussions began to shift. Even those who had once laughed at Ryan Mullery's jibes were forced to confront the real and painful impact of unchecked bullying. Their disciplined response demonstrated that vindictive aggression was not the answer. Instead, the power of quiet dignity and controlled self-defense must prevail. The sisters' actions served not only as a repudiation of the bullies' cruelty, but also as a lesson in integrity for the entire school community. Their measured, professional response stood in stark contrast to the chaos of the earlier confrontation. It showed that even when terror intrudes into one's daily life, the voice of dignity, expressed through deliberate action and unwavering discipline, can resonate louder than any shout, and can spark a change that reverberates far beyond the narrow corridors of hate. Within hours of the altercation in the corridor, the unedited video captured by a vigilant bystander had begun its relentless journey across the vast realm of social media. What started as a discreet recording on a smartphone quickly mutated into a viral sensation that bridged the gap between the silent halls of Ridgewood Academy and the outrage of an entire community. Clips of the disciplined yet powerful response by Jada and Janelle Rivers were shared, reshared, and commented upon with growing fervor. Hashtags such as #QuietStrength and #DignitYinAction began trending locally, and soon national news outlets picked up the story. Every frame of the confrontation, the sneers of Ryan Mullery's gang, the shock etched on onlookers' faces, and the calm, controlled moves of the twin sisters, painted a picture of injustice and a beacon of resilience. The video's widespread circulation ignited a firestorm of debates on race, power, and the responsibilities of elite institutions. Social media users, activists, and even some alumni of Ridgewood Academy expressed their indignation over the school's long-standing tolerance of subtle bullying, which had now escalated into physical violence. In online forums and comment threads, voices that had once been suppressed found their strength. Discussions surged about the damaging effects of unchecked privilege and the urgent need for systemic change. Within the school itself, the already tense atmosphere was transformed into one of frantic urgency. The school administration, which had hitherto turned a blind eye to the mounting harassment, was forced to confront the very real public relations and ethical disaster unfolding before them. An emergency assembly was convened in the main auditorium, a vast, echoing space that had traditionally hosted celebrations and award ceremonies. Now, it became the battleground for a crisis management meeting set against the backdrop of tears, anger, and palpable disbelief. Teachers, administrators, and several members of the school board gathered on a makeshift stage, their faces etched with anxiety. The principal, Mr. Hargrove, attempted to address the bewildered assembly, beginning with a shaky apology. "We are aware of the incident that occurred in the corridors this afternoon," he said, his voice wavering as he recounted the events in vague terms, careful to avoid the unassailable evidence provided by the video. The apology was measured, nearly mechanical, and it did little to assuage the frustration that radiated among the audience. As parents began streaming into the auditorium, some arriving in groups, others alone, the room transformed into a chamber of dissent. Heated discussions erupted in hushed corners. Parents recounted similar stories of neglect, allegations of discriminatory oversight, and their own encounters with the school's indifference toward bullying. A growing sentiment crystallized. If the administration had been so lax in permitting such behavior, then exactly what standard were they upholding in a school that prided itself on excellence? Within minutes of the assembly's commencement, the atmosphere grew explosive. A group of visibly angry parents took the stage, demanding answers. Voices trembled with controlled rage as one parent, Ms. Carter, stood to accuse the school board of allowing an environment where racist and elitist behaviors could fester unchecked for so long. "My child's self-worth is wounded by the same apathetic standards you claim to uphold. How can you justify protecting an institution that turns a blind eye when bullying escalates to physical violence?" she demanded, her voice cracking under the weight of emotion. Her words were met with a tense silence, punctuated by sporadic applause from others who had gathered to witness the drama unfold. School administrators shifted uncomfortably, attempting to placate the outraged parents with promises of thorough investigations, disciplinary action, and the implementation of anti-bullying programs. Yet, every promise was marred by the underlying certainty that nothing short of a full-scale inquiry could repair the shattered trust between the public and the institution. Throughout the day, the corridors of Ridgewood Academy seemed to pulse with the reverberations of the incident. Classrooms were abuzz with hushed conversations as students, previously indifferent or complicit bystander, now looked at one another with new awareness and solidarity. The bullies, led by Ryan Mullery, found themselves ostracized not only by their peers, but also by a community unwilling to accept the spectacle of their cruelty. Even faculty who had originally dismissed the twins' plight now gathered in whispered meetings to discuss stricter oversight and policy reforms. In an unexpected turn of events, local media reporters arrived on campus, their cameras and microphones capturing every moment of the ensuing chaos. Interviews with students revealed a mix of admiration for the twins and calls for accountability from the school's leadership. "They showed us what it means to stand up without stooping to violence," one student remarked. "It makes you wonder what kind of school values are really being taught here," another added, echoing the community's deep-seated desire for change. Amid this maelstrom, Jada and Janelle remained the calm eye of the storm. Later that afternoon, when reaching the school grounds, the twins observed a sea of concerned faces. Parents confronting teachers in the hallways, administrators fielding phone calls, and even a few of Ryan's former friends expressing regret over their silence. The incident that had originally threatened to isolate them had now become a catalyst for a broader, more inclusive dialogue about respect, accountability, and the true meaning of strength. Their composed behavior throughout the crisis solidified their status as not only survivors but also beacons of resilience whose quiet defiance had forced even the most powerful figures to reconsider their actions. While the school board tentatively promised an independent investigation into both the incident and the systemic neglect that allowed it to fester, the public outcry showed no sign of abating. Social media platforms continued to buzz with calls for justice, demanding stronger safeguards and a future free from the cruelty of unchecked elitism. The video, with its crystal-clear depiction of the sisters' disciplined response, had struck a chord that resonated far beyond the confines of Ridgewood Academy. It became emblematic of a wider struggle against injustice faced by many who dared to be different in a world dominated by privilege. In the midst of the administrative chaos outside the assembly hall, a subtle yet profound transformation was underway. The very narrative of the day, a narrative that had begun with public shaming and physical aggression, was being rewritten in real time by the voices of those who demanded change. Jada and Janelle Rivers, with their quiet fortitude and disciplined composure under fire, were no longer just victims of bullying. They had become symbols of a new kind of power, one defined by dignity, restraint, and an unwavering commitment to protect one's integrity without resorting to senseless violence. As the day drew to a close, the fallout from the video continued to ripple outward. Just as the corridors of the school bore the scars of the day's turmoil, so too did the hearts of everyone who had witnessed the incident, in person or via the glowing screens of their mobile devices. The incident had sparked something far greater than a disciplinary hearing. It had ignited a call for systemic reform, a demand that every member of the community, from the highest administrator to the youngest student, re-examine what it truly meant to respect human dignity. In the weeks that followed the explosive incident in the hallway, a palpable transformation began to ripple through Ridgewood Academy. The aftermath of the video, a vivid testament to the quiet yet formidable power displayed by Jada and Janelle Rivers, became a catalyst for sweeping change within the institution. What had once been a culture marked by indifference to racial and class-based bullying was now under intense scrutiny, as students, parents, and community leaders demanded accountability and reform. Within the familiar corridors that had once echoed with disdainful laughter and whispered racial slurs, a new energy took root. Posters promoting unity, respect, and inclusivity started to appear on bulletin boards near classrooms and the library. A coalition of students, previously silent or complicit bystanders, banded together to form an anti-bullying club. Their rallying cry, "Strength and Dignity," resonated deeply, and soon their meetings filled with impassioned discussions, creative brainstorming sessions, and planning for events designed to celebrate diversity rather than suppress it. One crisp Monday morning, as the first light of autumn filtered through the tall windows of the main building, a notable shift was visible. In the cafeteria, where once Ryan Mullery and his clique had ruled with sneers and condescension, several students began sitting together with an air of camaraderie. A group of juniors, inspired by the courage of the Rivers twins, quietly confronted members of the notorious clique. "We're tired of watching you tear others down for the sake of status," one confident look said. The bullies, now isolated and outnumbered by thoughtful voices, soon felt the weight of collective opposition. Some even expressed regret for their earlier behavior, their voices tinged with remorse during hushed conversations in the corridors. The school board, reacting to the fierce parental outcry and the viral outpour of community support, convened a special meeting. In an unprecedented move, they announced a review of the school's policies on bullying and discrimination. New guidelines were instituted, measures that mandated swift intervention when students reported any form of derogatory behavior. Faculties received comprehensive training on safeguarding student well-being, and an anonymous reporting system was introduced. For many in the community, it was a tangible sign that long-ignored issues were finally being addressed. Inside the classroom, teachers who had once brushed off the bullying as an inevitable rite of passage began to take a stand. During a history lesson on the civil rights movement, Ms. Porter, a seasoned English teacher, paused and addressed her class. "Today," she said, "we learn not only about those who fought for justice in the past, but also about the power each of you has to shape a more equitable future. Remember, real strength isn't loud. It is the steady courage of integrity, like the quiet resilience our peers have shown." Her words startled many of her students, and those who had previously been ambivalent or silent now looked to one another with renewed determination. For Jada and Janelle Rivers, the days that followed were a mixture of relief and bittersweet reflection. They attended classes as before, but now found themselves the subject of admiration rather than ridicule. Fellow students approached them in hallways and between classes, asking how they managed to remain so composed, so dignified, in the face of relentless adversity. "It isn't about unleashing your fury," Janelle explained quietly to a curious freshman, "but about channeling it into a force that preserves your own worth, and that of everyone around you." Her words, understated yet piercing, began to change how others thought about strength. On one unforgettable afternoon, the school organized a forum to address bullying and to celebrate diversity. The assembly hall, usually reserved for formal presentations and award ceremonies, buzzed with anticipation. Parents, students, and staff gathered, forming a semicircle around a modest stage. The highlight of the event was a speech by a respected alumnus who had once faced similar challenges. He retold the story of his own battles against prejudice and how one day, a quiet act of defiance changed everything. His speech culminated in a heartfelt tribute to the Rivers twins, who exemplified the truth that dignity does not need to roar to be heard. As the applause gradually swelled to a standing ovation, Ryan Mullery, once the ringleader of systematic bullying, sat at the back of the auditorium, his face a mixture of shock and quiet remorse. He noticed that even his closest friends had turned away from him, and for the first time, the realization of the harm he had wrought began to seep in. Teachers later confirmed that disciplinary actions were taken against him and his clique, reinforcing the new zero-tolerance policy that the administration had established. In the weeks that followed, Ridgewood Academy underwent a cultural metamorphosis. The echoes of derision faded, replaced by respectful dialogue and cautious optimism. The twins, still as modest as they had always been, began to speak at meetings and participate in initiatives aimed at bridging divides. They were invited to share their experiences at local community centers and youth organizations, their story serving as a beacon of hope for many who had long felt powerless in the face of injustice. The transformation was not instantaneous, nor was it without setbacks. There were still murmurs of dissent from those accustomed to the old regimes of privilege and silence. Yet, a profound change had been set in motion, a recognition that true power lay not in the ability to humiliate, but in the capacity to stand firm and inspire change. In every classroom discussion, every group project, and every recess conversation in the hallways, the message was clear: dignity, when defended through calm, controlled action, had the power to reshape even the most entrenched systems of bias. As the school year advanced, Ridgewood Academy emerged as a case study in transformation. A place where voices once muted by fear gradually found the courage to speak out, where policies were rewritten to protect the vulnerable, and where two sisters had become the emblem of a resilience that was gentle yet unbreakable. They thought they were witnessing weakness, yet they saw a strength that did not shout. Subscribe to not miss more stories where dignity speaks the language of action.